All right, we're at noon. Let's get started. Thank you for coming in. Today we're going to talk about mobile performance. Let's just go straight to introductions. Sally, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi everyone. I'm Saili. I'm a technical project manager on one of the platform accounts in Akamai. I've been here in Akamai for around 4+ years, and I'm really excited to be here. And hope you guys learn something and enjoy it.
My name is Bhagirath Gaonkar. I first started at Akamai in 2009. I've played a few different roles here. I've been in pre-sales, I've done some post-sales implementation work, and now I work on the product strategy side where I help bring our professional services and support organizations and our product and engineering teams together and make sure that our products that come out are easily serviceable, supportable, and essentially work with the core team for launch activities. All right, and I am the lead for web performance and mobile, so I do work with these teams that we're going to really be talking about today. So to kind of set the stage, let's quickly take a few minutes to talk about why this is important, why is mobile performance important. Then we'll dive into like a few tricks and tips that we wanted to put together. I realize now after putting the entire deck together that some of these are not as simple as we initially thought the whole program was supposed to be, but they're important nonetheless. We kind of put together like all of the things we thought would help just elevate your mobile performance. So we started with the network protocols. There's a mobile app performance SDK that you could have used. We kind of brought that in. Then we realized that, images are super heavy on whether it's a mobile web or app. Images are a big part of it, so we brought the image manager piece in. And then we started thinking about what else could we do, and then brought some additional pieces in from other places where we've experienced some pain, or we know that those things are simple, they're probably old technology and features, but they're still very, very beneficial. So we brought that together at the end, tie it all together. As we go along, we also have a couple of demos. We'll try and make it interactive. If you have questions, feel free to stop us. If you can't hear us, okay, or if you have any other comments, feel free to stop us. Let's make this as interactive as possible. We have some giveaways, so the more questions you ask, the better your chances of getting them. Yeah. All right. A lot of studies have kind of shown and validated what our thought processes are, right? That performance is important to business. Irrespective of what business you're in, there are metrics that are impacted by improving performance, whether it's search SEO ranking, whether it's revenue directly, or whether it's ad click-through rates or session times. Any number of reasons, like performance impacts business. Just highlighting a couple of main ones. Amazon sees a 1% drop in revenue for every 100 milliseconds that it's slower. That's a huge amount of revenue to lose. 53% of visits to a mobile site get abandoned if it takes longer than 3 seconds to load. And now as we go into the app world, we're seeing more and more instantaneous expectations from customers as well. We'll talk a little bit about that. Again, studies validate what we've already kind of hypothesized, right? That mobile usage is increasing, but there's some interesting trends to notice. During the work hours, the desktop rules still. But the beginning of the day and towards the end of the day, prime time, you see the mobile kind of like taking over. And this is only going to increase. Mobile users actually, not only are they more loyal, the app users actually spend more money per year on online. If you notice the conversion rates, the app users are have the highest conversion rate. They're your most loyal users. But as you start thinking about mobile performance, their needs are also so high. And a recent study, it's not a recent, it's a few years ago, like 3 years ago or something, 2015, Ericsson did a study to figure out what the cognitive load was on a person when they're experiencing performance delays. And funnily enough, the experience of a mobile user is the same cognitive load that they have when they're watching a horror film. You don't want your highest spending users to like have that kind of fear when they're actually experiencing delays. That's insane. So when you start thinking about that, the challenges are also endless. Like you have so many different places where things could go wrong. So there's fragmented devices, there's different network connections, there's different network types, connectivity strengths, and then you have the entire middle mile problem which you have across the internet any which way. So there's a lot of different challenges that make it more and more tricky to create these unique situational experiences for users on different devices, whether it's a watch, whether it's any number of small devices. The smaller the device, the harder it is to give them the right kind of experience. So it's getting harder. So here are a few things that we wanted to talk about that make some of these go away. Not all of them, but some of these challenges go away. So first, let's talk about protocols, and in particular, we want to focus on IPv6. All of us know that we're running out of IPv4 address space. By the end of the year, we're going to have so many devices, it's almost 2 times the number of IPv4 address spaces we have. But that's not really the reason why you should enable it. The reason you should enable it is because the network translation takes a lot of time. It adds a lot of latency. So as you go from an IPv6 device to an IPv4 network, that translation adds so much latency. Let me show you some case studies. On T-Mobile, it was about 60% faster if you were just going on IPv6 straight through. These are all US carriers, but every single carrier saw a minimum increase of approximately 20%. That's big for just a small little flick of a button on the Akamai network. It's as simple as that. It's just one small radio button. Of course, you'd have to do it on your origin as well, but even if you don't do it on your origin, you can still have your client to Akamai experience over IPv6 without the translation, which still adds value, without having to do anything else. We thought a lot about adding HTTP2 right here, but we left it for the end, so we'll come back to the protocol with HTTP2 at the end. Next, let's talk about app performance. The expectations of app users are exponentially higher or greater than any other kind of user. They're also your most loyal users, but they're also your most fickle users. If you have a good experience, they're very loyal to you. If they have even a couple of bad experiences, they'll just stop using your app, and almost 40% of them just uninstall an app if they don't have a good experience. So if you get it right, there's a lot of upside, but if you get it even a little bit wrong, it's really bad. Yeah. So the solution here that we're trying to recommend is you've been Akamizing from this side of the world today, origin to the Akamai edge, and then the edge delivers everything. But with the SDK, you can extend the Akamai functionality to the device. Let me talk a little bit more about what those are. You can start caching on each device now. So that adds significant value if you're reusing resources across the different pages on your app or experiences on your app. You can adapt your app to the changing network conditions. I'll go into a little more detail about this one. Then we've also introduced something called a sure route for cellular, which is essentially picking the right ISP. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then you can pre-position content. You've heard this on the main stage as well, and I'll get into a little bit of detail over there as well. And then, of course, you need analytics, so we've given you some custom events also that you can use. Let's get into it. So on the network awareness side, if the SDK can hint back to either Akamai or to Origin on what the network conditions are, we can tailor the app experience. So your developer, for instance, if he notices a low latency, can immediately change the app experience to do the lean app, right? Just reduce the fidelity of the images, figure out if you can just download a catalog ahead of time and just use that. Even in the cases of if the network quality is high, if I'm connected to a really good Wi-Fi, I'd want to give them the best image that I can really show them on their device. I don't want to curtail any of that experience. Your marketing teams would be very happy with that. You could also hint to Akamai. So you could use image compression right on Akamai and say, hey, I got this network quality from my SDK. Akamai, you do your thing. It's all automated. So there's no code involved in this side of the house. Your developers don't really need to get involved. You just have to tell us that for low network conditions, use a smaller image. And that's it. Once you set that policy, we'll just follow that every time. And then you can tailor origin content. So if you're going for dynamic content, and if you know it's low latency, don't send back a lot of information. The example here is a search result. Instead of sending back like 50 search results, send back 5. They can go to the next page and get another 5. But at least they don't really have to wait for that a long time just because you're sending them a lot of the data up front. I know I'm going really quickly, so I just want to pause here for a second to see if there are questions or if there's anything that you want me to clarify on.
Do you have any data with IPv6 strike versus IPv6 default patterns?
Yes, sure. Let me go back to that slide. Oops. That's the data right there. So these are the 3 different carriers that we tried. AT&T and Sprint on the left, Verizon in the middle, and T-Mobile on the side. A minimum of 20% improvement was seen if you went IPv6 straight. And T-Mobile was probably where? I'm sorry? Overall. I'm sorry?
What kind of improvement is 40% or 30%? Is only what? Is the establishing a specific connection?
No, it's the entire session length. How long it took to go straight from experiencing that entire series of activities, from going straight from on an IPv6 connection versus doing the translation and going to an IPv4 origin from an IPv6 device. All right, short route for cellular. This one's fairly straightforward. From the device, we're going to send out 2 different connection requests, and we're picking the closest 2 ISPs that we see, and whichever comes back the quickest, we'll pick that. That's all it's doing. On the SDK, by default, you can enable it. No, this is not enabled by default because this has to be done at the device level. It has to split the request into 2. The SDK does that. Pre-positioning. You saw a little bit of this in the main stage keynote. The idea behind this is if you have if you know what your users want, you can position stuff on their device even before they ask for it. So let me give you an example. I'm a Warriors fan. So the first thing I do when I wake up is usually go check the scores for the basketball game, right? ESPN knows this about me. If they were using the SDK, they just send that information to me. Right now, what they're doing with that information that they have is making that more relevant and keeping that on the top of the list for me. But it still has to come from their origin. I don't really have it on my device. But if they use this, then what they could do is position like, the top video or something. Usually if there's commentary or highlights, I usually watch that. So if there was a highlight for the last night's game, they could just push it when they could use conditions like if it's plugged into a charger and it's connected to Wi-Fi and it's between the time of 9 p.m. and 6 a.m., push content down. They can set limits on that. All of that is flick of a button on the control panel on Luna, or you could just do it via API calls as well. The who you want to push to has to come from your marketing team. That does not come from us. Exactly. So if they're on Wi-Fi, then push. If you're on cellular, don't push. You can configure that. You can set it on the server side. So it's a control information that can be sent to the device to do that. Yeah. So the mobile app performance per se is to push images and your API, maybe a static API call responses. But if you want to do videos, a similar app on the media side, actually called predictive content delivery, can push down a video as well. Yes. Even JavaScript or CSS or whatever else you might need to push.
Can the SDK consume first-party cookie values as a root? For example, when a student signs into the mobile app through the Universe network, we place a first-party cookie as a user ID.
Okay.
Actually, sort of version of the user ID on the application. Can the SDK then consume that and say that's who's actually consuming the content? The pre-positioning happens based on that first-party cookie value.
Okay, that's the first question that stumped me, so I have to give you something. I'd say that we have our expert bar downstairs in the expo floor. That'd be a good place to go start. Or there's also a demo happening at the web performance booth, which is just behind the expert bar. There's a mobile demo as well. The folks there will probably be able to help you better than I can. Yes, sir. Yeah. So if it's connected to the internet, yeah, we have push enabled on the app. So just like push notifications or push email, it's the same technology being used. Correct. So the client doesn't really need to initiate a connection if it has given permission to the SDK to initiate it. So once you, like example for your email, if you've enabled push, the client doesn't really need to establish this connection. The server can start pushing, we can establish that connection. So just the same way this is working. But the initial, your app should have within, let's say it's an iPhone, they have to be able to go into the settings and turn that on or off, right? If they've turned it off, then we can't. No. All right, there's reports for the demo. I just recommend that you go down to the booth. They have demos of the new reports. This is a screenshot of the older report. I couldn't put it in because they just released it like a week ago, so I didn't really have the time to get the new report for you. We did a case study recently, and this was also done in a web roadmap session if you've already attended this. It's a very recent study. So Sears enabled this SDK on version 17 of their app. So you see the difference between version 16.2, which is the red, and version 17, which is blue. Blue has the SDK enabled. So the thing that I'd point out here is the shift of about 45% of their users into the 2-second time zone, as opposed to about 30% of their users being on the 3-second time zone. So you're pushing a lot of your users to the left of the curve. All right, any questions about this so far? Other questions? Before I hand it off to Siley to talk about images. And we do have Michael in the room, I see, who's our ex-resident expert on images. So
that's perfect.
Any question we'll be able to take.
All right, thanks, Bhagirath. So next up, we're going to talk a little bit about image optimizations. And the very first question we got to ask is, why do we have to worry about images? So no matter what website you have, be it a social media, automotive, finance, e-commerce, you cannot basically have a website today which does not have images. It's just boring to read plain text. Humans are programmed to react to images better. In fact, there was a study done that says that articles with images in it actually get 94% more views. So that's literally how important images are today. So it's inevitable that, over time, number of images in websites have increased. But what's even more interesting is that the screenshot on the left, it shows that over a period of the last 5 years, sure, the number of images have increased, but the size of the images itself has actually tripled just in over 5 years. And if you think about it, that's a lot. That means if you're delivering a website, most of the bytes that are being delivered to the end users are images. Another very interesting way of looking at this is by looking at the components of the pages. So if you look at the average page size by file type per resolution, a page would typically have like an HTML, CSS, JavaScript, but the orange section in there is actually how much of those pages are composed of images. And it's literally more than 2/3 of the web page. So that's really huge. And if you want to master your performance of your website, then you got to master your images. And that's literally like half the battle won, or probably even more. So how can Akamai help in here? We have our flagship image solution, which is called as the Image Manager. I bet you guys have heard a lot about this already. Tom mentioned it in his keynote. But what are the different features specific to Image Manager that actually helps solving this image problem? The first one is very interesting. We have something called as the automatic perceptual quality algorithm. This algorithm is intelligent enough to be able to dynamically compress the images just to the right extent so that you get the highest byte savings. But at the same time, from a human perception, you don't really see a difference. And we are going to actually show you a demo of that soon after this. But essentially, the idea is that specifically on mobile devices, where the screen sizes are so small, you can actually leverage this to compress the images even further because it's very hard to tell the difference on a smaller mobile device. So that's one of the key features that Image Manager offers today. Other than that, we have something called as automatic resizing. So as you guys know, there are lots of mobile devices with different screen sizes and resolutions available out there. Now, it's really difficult for you guys to be able to actually manage so many variations of these image sizes. So what Image Manager does, it dynamically resizes the images that fits on the viewport width of the device. That way, first, it doesn't have to download unnecessary images which the end user is not even going to see. It's only based on the viewport of the end user that those many images will be viewed. And the rest will not even be downloaded because it doesn't make sense. So you're going to save a lot of bandwidth as well as it's real time and you don't actually even have to manage any of that. So it's a win-win situation all over. I'm sure you guys would have heard of these new image formats that have come in which are specific to the browsers. Like you have WebP for Chrome, JPEG XR for IE, and JPEG 2000 for the iOS and Safari. Again, Image Manager is able to produce these different the picture formats based on which end user or which client is making a request, the type of the browser. Again, this is done automatically, doesn't really need any input from you guys or any changes on the origin server whatsoever. And the last one, actually these are just some, but the last one on the slide is the artistic transformations that you can apply. So other than all the sizes and the formats that it can create these derivative images of, you can also apply some artistic formations. Like, for example, the really popular one is the watermark. If you have like a sale going on, then you want to immediately apply a watermark to a bunch of images in the library. You just have to make one update to the policy, and it takes care of it. And the best part is that it's instantaneous, so within a few seconds, the policy will be applied, and you can have your watermark in place. Other than that, you can do a bunch of other things. There's zoom, there's cropping, there's resizing. So we have a whole suite of options in the policy manager, which you can take care of. Yes?
About the zoom,
Yeah.
am I allowed to set my own focal points? Because that's one of the big things that I'm
Like what exactly in terms of?
I myself want to decide which part of the image gets zoomed.
I believe you can do that, yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'll see it.
Sounds good.
All right. If you guys attended the keynote, Tom's keynote, you guys might have seen these case studies that were done for these particular customers. But this is a great success story, and we really wanted to reinforce how just making a very small change on your end, that is just enabling Image Manager, can actually lead to such significant consequences or improvements. So the study on the left, the linen chest, it says that mobile users with load times faster than 3 seconds increased from a 9 to 14%, which is huge, which means it led to higher performance, which again translates to a good end user experience.
And their conversions went up by 19%.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point. And for Telegraph Media, which is actually my favorite, the study was done, and it shows that the session lengths increased by 13% on specific to mobile devices. So if you think about it, the session lengths are going to correlate to more conversion rates because there are high chances of people actually buying stuff now. And that, again, leads to higher revenue from your mobile end users. And now coming to my favorite part of the session, which is the Image Manager demo.
Okay, no pictures. On this one, there's a rule, there's no pictures, okay? Promise me there's not going to be pictures of
They
this.
don't get the t-shirt.
All right, let's go here. So Siley and I went down to the booth, and yes. So Siley and I went down to the booth to show the live demo of that. So we said, let's just take our own pictures and do this. So the couple of new features that we didn't talk about on the slide, you have the product viewer functionality that you could use. Most e-commerce retailers are having these on their site. Now you can do that by stitching together a bunch of images. You have dynamic policies that, as an example for the question you asked, sir, for focal points, you have dynamic policies that you can give your developers. They can just append it to a query string and then tell us what to do. In this case, as this example, they're adding a watermark on the northwest side, which is the logo of Akamai. But you could make it do other things as well. There's a bunch of other things that you could do. We do automatic focal points, so automatic focus, so facial cropping. So it zooms in and focuses on by doing facial recognition. And then finally, you have perceptual quality. So in this particular case, there's a 51% reduction between the image on the left and the right. I don't know if you can see the before and after. The one on the left of the line is the before. The one on the right, yeah. Let's blow it up, yeah.
So yeah, as you can see, you can't even really tell the difference. And since we're talking about mobile devices, I mean, you can leverage this even more, considering you can get very, very high compression without knowing it.
He's such a rule breaker there.
Yeah, he's definitely not getting the t-shirt.
All right.
All right, cool.
All right, let's get back to it.
Any questions so far based on Image Manager or anything else? Yeah.
Unstructured changes,
Let's say watermark, and then I want to change it the next day. Oh, absolutely, yeah. Like I said, yeah, you can purge it once you're done, because the edge servers are going to cache the images, but you can just purge and update the policy to remove the watermark, and that should take care of it.
Oh, you already got one.
Yeah, we have to take it back though.
Oh, we did take it back. Here you go, sir. You've been helping us out. Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on to the miscellaneous topics? Okay. All right, so we spoke a bunch about different products that Akamai offers, be it the IPv6 enablement, the mobile SDK, image manager. But just having Ion, that you guys, probably most of you already have a delivery configuration, what are the different things, what are the things that we can do more or in addition to what we already know? So here are a simple, sort of tips and tricks which you can probably at least start a conversation with your account teams and see if this is something that can help you for your mobile sites or mobile devices. The first one is a timeout detection and failover. So how many times has it happened to you guys that you just open up a native mobile app and it just hangs like inexplicably, and you're not sure what's happening, you cannot abort the call, and it's just frustrating to stare at the screen. This happens a lot, but using Akamai, you can actually reduce and detect these hangs much in advance. There's something called as a connection and a read timeout error, which we keep a track of. And by reducing this timeout error, you can actually detect this hang way in advance so that you can quickly fail and show a response to your end user rather than just hanging for an infinite amount of time. Not just that, but you can actually take this one step further by doing failover. So either you could have something like retrying the same origin server, or you could try a different origin server if there's a failure. Or you could also serve like a custom JSON error response to your mobile apps, which they can understand, and it looks friendly enough for the end user rather than like an ugly error page. So that's something that can really help with the end user experience when there are failures in terms of the origin. The next one is the HTTP2, and I know Bhagirath spoke about the IPv6, and H2 is one of our next generation protocols. I know a lot of customers already have started the move towards enabling H2. Actually, let me ask quickly, how many of you are supporting H2 on your origin servers today? Okay, that's a significant number. That's great. But even if you're not, just by enabling H2 on the Akamai layer, you can at least leverage the H2 features between the end user and the Akamai servers, which is also going to give you a lot of performance benefit. There are a lot of inbuilt features with H2 that actually help with this. The one important one is the header compression, specifically for mobile devices, because as you guys know, with mobiles, there's an inherent latency that comes with the cellular network. So any request usually has headers associated with it. And if you have cookies, then it just keeps multiplying, and it's a lot of overhead. So with H2, the headers actually get compressed, and now you're saving on a lot of these bytes that you have been delivering. The other one is the server push, where you can actually you can sort of give a hint to the server to push more resources than the end user has asked for. That way, like for example, let's say the mobile has asked for an HTML page, you can actually, the next thing it's going to ask for the CSS, the JavaScript, and the images. That's like a known thing. So the server can actually push these resources in advance so that you save on the round trip time when the request actually comes in.
And we've just recently made an update to our algorithm that can then be a more aggressive pusher than it was over the last few months. If you want to get a demo, I don't have that URL bookmarked, otherwise I've done it, but if you go down to the Expo Center and on the Web Performance booth, there's a demo that has a Pies plugin which shows you exactly what got pushed and what domains you were pre-connecting to, so that you can do this comparison. And we are doing this in an automated manner so that you don't have to do it. But if you,
Spice is you can download.
Yeah, it's
it's
for
a
everyone.
plugin that you can download for Chrome or other browsers, and it just shows you a lot of detail. It's PIEZ.
Yeah, it's all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's for everyone.
So the thing with this is we're doing this in an automated manner, but if you choose to do it without the automation, there are other ways in which to do the same thing without automation. And we'll be happy to have a conversation around that as well.
Cool. Yeah,
Sure.
sure. Nothing,
No.
literally nothing. It's actually a checkbox.
The only caveat is that it has to be a secure connection. It can't be over HTTP.
Yeah, because
That's the main caveat.
yeah, it's for any
It's
irrespective
a
of the
connection protocol, so it happens before any of the other stuff comes in.
Yeah. Cool. The next one is optimum cache fragmentation for higher cache hit ratio. Quick question for the audience. Can anybody tell me what a cache key is? Cache key. Anyone heard of the term? Okay, since you raised first.
Cache key is basically indicating what's the actual URL value plus the cache value of a specific URL.
Right. Okay, perfect. So, like you said, cache key is a unique identifier of any object that's stored in the Akamai Edge servers. And it's usually the URL, and it could have some additional parameters like a header or a cookie or some variables or query parameters. So, the interesting part about cache keys is that the more the permutations of this cache key, the lesser the cache hit ratio, which is obvious because that means you have way too many permutations of this object, and hence the cache hit ratio is going to automatically reduce. A good example of this, and this is actually something that we had done with a customer some time ago, there was this weather app, and what they used to do is they would include the latitude, the longitude, and the zip code in their cache key because they wanted to cache those pages, which makes complete sense. But if you think about the amount of latitude, longitude, zip code combinations that are there, it's pretty much going to dilute your cache to a huge extent. So that's not really a good way to implement it. So what you can do is at Akamai layer, you can actually use something what we call as a translator mechanism. And this is not a product or a feature. This will have to be done using advanced code from a professional services team. But essentially, you can have something like a location ID, like one single variable which matches to 3 different variation or one single combination of the latitude, longitude, zip code. That way, instead of having now 3 permutations, you're just going to have 1 permutation of that the location ID. So you've automatically reduced the number of permutations by a factor of 3, and hence increased the probability of hitting the object in cache. It's really important to think about this because a lot of times we implement dynamic page caching on all our pages, but we don't actually go and look to see how is this really helping us, and is the cache hit ratio really optimum, and how we can improve it. So specifically for mobile devices, again, like I said, and I know I'm saying this multiple times, but since there are inherent challenges with mobile devices, it becomes even more important to think about performance. And the last one is smart balancing in cloud using cloudlets. Again, I know you might have heard or are already using cloudlets that we have to offer. But specifically, if you're using, let's say, multiple data centers, either using like a cloud service or actual physical data centers, it's a lot of times you need to balance traffic between those. Like, let's say send 80% of the traffic to one and the 20% to another data center. That's where you can actually leverage our cloudlet, specifically the application load balancer cloudlet, which is pretty new. That helps you in doing this in a very quick and easy way. Other than that, it actually also helps you give session stickiness so that the end users don't hop between multiple data centers, which is a common problem that customers usually face. And it also has inbuilt failover. So if one data center goes down, then it automatically will fail over to another. And when the earlier one is up, it will fail back to the previous one. So it's all inbuilt in it.
The main advantage is that you're making this decision closer to the end user. So you're not waiting the latency of the middle mile to make that decision.
Yeah, and the big one is that again, just like Image Manager, the changes are instantaneous. So any changes that you make to the cloudlet policy for the ALB cloudlet is going to happen within a few seconds, and whatever percentage routing you want to change is going to take place very quickly. So these are some of the tips, tricks, ideas, features that we had for you for specific to mobile today. Last slide just is, you master mobile, you master a huge chunk of your traffic, and improve your business. So, yeah. We can take, I guess, questions, or are we out of time? Okay.
We're at time, but we'll happily take questions.
No, it's between the origins. Like if you have origin A and B, and if the A goes down, then it comes to B.
Correct.
Yes.
But between the edge and the customer, there's automation there, right? Our network automatically detects that if a particular edge server goes down, it transitions that to appear automatically. So
that's already in the platform. So.
There could be many other reasons. So I was thinking if there's a way to detect why the page is not loading, could be.
If it's a device level thing, is what you're saying. So I think that can be set up as a specific event if you have the SDK. And on that event, you can trigger an alert to you to, take action.
Cool. Any other questions?